Good morning, everybody. Good to see you. It's nice to see a full house. That's always both daunting and exciting in the same breath. So quite a bit to talk to you about this morning. The talk's going to be in two halves. First is what we've been up to as RComp and RComp Interactive, and then I'll just touch briefly on my involvement with RISC developments. You've probably all heard Richard talking a moment ago, but you'll hear, if you like, the other partner talking a little bit about that at the end. Starting with our activities over the last few months. I've purposely not brought a computer in with me today because there wasn't a lot of software to show on the big screen. Main recent releases, software-wise, have mostly been just sort of minor upgrades to things. We did a new Fireworks Pro in October, version 2.20. And if you're an existing Fireworks owner, you can upgrade to the latest CD for a £5. There have been sort of minor upgrades to NetFetch and SafeStore and a variety of other things over the last few months. So by all means, if you are wanting to replace your discs and things at the show, come and see. But that hasn't really been our focus in the last few months because we've been very, very busy on the hardware front as usual. At the moment, we've got essentially three streams of machines that we're running. There's the RISC RISC range, and last October we launched a brand new member of that family, the so-called RISC Go, which you can see I have an example of here. We actually do two variants now of this because it's been so popular. We started with one which could fold, so it was the screen was attached to the base, and it folded round so that you could use it sort of flipped over as a tablet or flipped up as a laptop. But we also do this variant where, if I'm gentle with it, it completely comes apart and it's not broken. And then we can put that nicely back again, and we're back to being a laptop again. Now, when you're running RISC on it, you would naturally want to have the keyboard and touchpad aspect because RISC really needs mouse, keyboard type input. That's what it's good at. But you also have the other side of the system, and then you can use it as a tablet, and that works with the touch pretty well. I still personally prefer to use it in laptop mode almost exclusively because I'm a bit traditional like that, really. I like a mouse. I like a keyboard. I can type on a keyboard. It just feels right. But the point is, you've got one flexible device that does it all. As you can see from me just kind of flopping it around in my hands, I'm not a strong person, but I have no problem sort of carrying this around all day. You've got long battery life. So, I mean, they rate up to sort of 10, 11, 12 hours of battery life. Probably practical battery life is a bit lower than that, but certainly there's enough battery to sort of do a whole day at an exhibition, which is quite good going. We had it running RISC all day at an exhibition, which is usually drains the battery of an ordinary laptop. And you get sort of modern connections like USB 3, modern sort of wireless AC, video connections via HDMI, and all the gubbings that you would expect on a modern system at a low price in a very small, compact form factor that is still big enough that you can read the text and interact with. It's not like sort of trying to do a diddly little thing. So it's a very practical, affordable solution, and that's proven to be very successful. To be honest with you, I was a little bit surprised because I didn't know how people were going to react to it. But as I say, it's been a bit of a sort of surprise hit, as it were. So that's the RISC Go. Available in the two presentations, as it were, two styles. And companion RISC products are also evolving with new processors and things which are proving really fast and good. But of course, a lot of the focus is on the ARM-X6 and the Time Machine pure ARM machines. And of course, we're continuing to invest and develop those systems. So February saw the release of what we call a TurboLAN high-speed networking upgrade for the ARM-X6. That was pretty exciting because it boosted the network performance way up. We saw networking speeds of in excess of 30 megabytes a second over a network link. Now, for RISC-OS, that is remarkably fast. If you think that the RISC PC's hard disk ran at 2 megabytes a second, we're seeing 30 megabytes a second over a network link. And that's not using high-end expensive equipment. That's using a standard gigabit network switch. And yes, it was using quite a nice network-attached storage, but this is not something that is wildly expensive. We're talking stuff that most of you could afford if you wanted to quite easily. Sort of a couple of £100 type equipment, £300 network storage. So when it's not mind-blowingly expensive equipment, seeing very, very high performance on that through RISC-OS. And of course that makes doing anything relating to networking so much more pleasant and also much smoother, which is very nice because there are some things that can be decidedly lumpy. I mean, for example, if you're networking with Virtual Acorn is a typical one, that can be really lumpy because Virtual Acorn networking is always a bit of a... it works, but it can be lumpy, I think is the best way to describe it. With the new TurboLAN driver, we get very smooth transfers to and from the Virtual Acorn system. So I have a Virtual Acorn system on one wall and the ARMX6 on the other, and I'm chucking around a couple of 100 meg files. Not a problem. So that was quite an exciting upgrade for the ARMX6. And we also released a new operating system upgrade, which introduced things like disk partitioning. So you can now have much larger drives available on RISC-OS and partition them up into chunks, so that you can put in sort of more or less any terabyte drive and knock it into 4 256 lumps and use it right now with the shipping ROMs. You don't need to buy special drives or anything. Boom, there it is, off you go. The other thing that we did to sort of, if you like, match that is introduce a new solution, which is a RAID solution for RISC-OS. So what this does is, for those unfamiliar with RAID, the most common use of RAID these days is what's called RAID mirroring. There are all sorts of different versions of RAID, but for the purposes of this talk and what people are likely to be doing, mirroring is the one. Mirroring basically allows you to use several physical hard drives as a single physical drive, with the idea that when you write data to the one drive, it in fact gets written to both drives. And that way, if one drive fails, your data is safe. And in a world where we're now sort of dealing with terabytes of data, the fact is that a drive failure, well, at any point, but particularly now given the size of individual drives, is a pretty scary prospect. That if you have a single drive and you put all your eggs into that basket and that drive dies, splat, that's a lot of data down the Swanee. So the RAID solution allows you to have two drives. In this particular case, you could have more in a single as presented as a single drive. The ones we've got on the stand are 1 terabyte, pair of 1 terabyte drives that you can access directly from your RISC-OS system. Protects you against any kind of failure of the drive, and the way we've done them, they can actually be connected to a RISC-OS machine, connected to a Windows machine, connected to a Mac, whatever you fancy. So you've got a level of data security between systems as well with that solution. And that's very affordable. I mean, the sort of deal we're offering is essentially if you pay for the 2 drives, you get the rest of it for free. So that's quite an attractive package for data security. And that obviously works hand in hand with the partitioning things. If you want to partition those purely for RISC-OS, you can do that with the new partitioning that's in the ARMX6. We've also been enhancing the time machine system that uses the titanium board with additional drive options, ROM upgrades and software upgrades, and we've also done a new version of our graphical Linux for titanium, which can be bundled with a time machine system, so that you can have Linux and RISC-OS on the same computer. That solution now features more software, latest versions, I think better graphics, more applications, better network. Suffice to say, lots of across the board improvements to the graphical Linux, and we have those available to show as well. So developments on all fronts on the hardware that we're offering. You'll be able to try all of the computers that we offer on the stand. We have examples of pretty much everything. And by all means, come and grab me and talk to me either about the software or about the hardware. I'm more than happy to talk, although it does tend to get a bit the queues sometimes get a bit long. But do be patient, and I'll get to you in the end. And I'm more than happy to show you any aspect of it that you would like to see and get to grips with. Now, obviously, while we've been doing all of this work, one of the big challenges is moving everything on to support, from a software perspective, to support the hardware that we're developing. And this is sort of how I'm going to segue into talking about RISC-OS developments, because RISC-OS developments was born out of Richard Brown and myself talking about how to tackle the big problems within RISC-OS. All those problems where you sit down and say, wouldn't it be great if RISC-OS could do And then you think, well, we can't do that because we can't afford to. So what Richard and I talked about was what can we do to make that problem go away? And the answer that we came up with was that if we pooled our own resources into one big company and also looked for investment outside, both outside the RISC-OS world and poured everything, both of ourselves and the outside, into a pot, then we could actually look and try and tackle the big issues. And so that's ultimately what your purchases of our RISC-OS computers and our RISC-OS software are now going into. So when I stood up at previous exhibitions and I stood up and I said, when you buy our machines, you're supporting the RISC-OS scene, and you're probably sitting there thinking, yeah, I'll come saying that. They're going out to the Audi dealer and buying a new big car. No, I drive a Skoda. And I very much like my Skodas. And I eat cheese toasties. So no wine and caviar. What this is doing is pouring the money that we get in, minus the cost of a cheese toastie or two, back into the RISC-OS scene. And using those resources to allow us to employ programmers, to get work done, allow programmers to be paid properly as we try to do anyway, but to actually tackle the big issues. 20 years ago, roughly speaking, when Acorn packed up, I stood in front of an audience much like this down in Cambridge. It was all developers, but quite a few of the faces in here are developers too, so that'll do. And I preached about the need to separate RISC-OS from Acorn, because not forget Phoebe, but Phoebe was one thing, but preserving RISC-OS was the important thing, because without RISC-OS there couldn't be any other RISC-OS hardware that ran RISC-OS. And I said, look, we've got to save RISC-OS from Acorn, because otherwise we won't have a scene in 10 to 20 years' time. That led to RISC-OS Limited, which had its successes and its failures, and that led to Castle and to RISC-OS Open and so on. This RISC-OS development is 20 years later saying, how can we have RISC-OS in another 20 years? And our feeling is that only by tackling the big issues can we guarantee that there will be a future for the platform. And that's what we're trying to do here. So when you buy your software, when you buy your RISC-Cube, whether you buy your ARMX6 or your Time Machine or whatever if you just want to buy a copy of Fireworks, you're now able, that is going to be going directly back into the development of the platform going forwards. As I say, I'm sure Richard has told you more about the plans there, so I won't go into the details. Sorry? Oh, well.
It's a secret.
Oh.
NDA.
Oh, right, okay.
Unless you wish to tell us the name of the project now.
Well, the thing is, there are three. I don't know whether, as I say, I'm not quite sure exactly what he said, but there are basically three pillars to the project.
He said Andrew will tell us everything.
Oh, did he? Oh, well, there are three pillars to the project. There's one main goal, and then there are two supporting pillars involved that without which the main goal cannot be achieved. And the main goal will probably be of interest to all of you. The supporting aspects will definitely be of interest, because without those supporting aspects, RISC-OS doesn't move forward. So it's a three-pronged attack to make RISC-OS into the future. And that means involving all of the people who are at this show today. This is not a divide and conquer type thing. This is a supporting RISC-OS Open. This is a supporting CGA. This is supporting RComp. This is supporting Orpheus. This is supporting ident computer. This is supporting RISC-OS, Sine Nomine. Everybody around the hall, RISC-OS developments is for everybody. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme or anything like that. It's about ensuring that RISC-OS is where it needs to be going forward, so that we can bring new blood in, so that we can go forwards, and that RISC-OS sort of continues into the future. And so that's, needless to say, taken a fair bit of time recently to get off the ground, and I spent an awful lot of time talking to people on the phone and driving around and organising stuff. Richard's doing the front side of things in terms of talking to people with investment and side of things. I'm looking after the organisation of the technical side of things, much as I have done in the past. And we look forward to moving things forwards is the key. We have big plans. The reason for not being too explicit about the big plans is because if we say we're going to do X and there are bumps along the road, you'll hold us accountable at this stage, and we don't want to get hopes up and then dash them. On the flip side, the one thing we do know is that the money that we're putting in, we will see returns from, because we have to see returns from, and therefore you will be seeing benefits over the next 6 to 12 months. Right, okay, so instead of going on and on and on, I'm going to stop there and open it up to questions. So feel free to ask any questions you like about what we're doing with RComp. If you want to know about RISC-OS developments, you're probably going to get a bit of a veiled answer, but I'll do what I can to answer anything that you may want to know.
What are the big problems that RISC-OS needs to tackle?
That's a veiled question.
That's a genuine question. I mean, I have my own views.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think if you sit down and have a think to yourself about what software and hardware challenges we're facing, on the software front, there are very specific things that RISC-OS struggles with. On the hardware front, in order to support big projects going forwards, there are things that need to be supported within RISC-OS and within the hardware that we already have available in order to make things move forwards. I'm not going to say more than that.
For Parliament in the next.
Well, I promise, Richard, I won't blab my mouth too much. But I mean, in order for big things to be done, we need to be leveraging every ounce of hardware that we can, put simply. And if we want to attract new blood, we need to have systems that do, where all of the hardware works and works well, and works as well as other alternatives. And that's the goal for the future. Because you want somebody who comes in to take a look at RISC-OS, and rather than saying, "Ooh, that doesn't do," you want them to say, "Oh, let me look deeper at RISC-OS." And we need to be growing the user base, and we need to be in the right place going forward. I mean, things like the Pi RC15 that RISC-OS Open have put out is a brilliant starting point in terms of, at least we now have a version that will work on more or less any Pi for the new blood. But of course, that's just, that gets you in the door. We need to be in a position where they try Raspberry and they try RISC-OS, and the experience makes them not just flip over to the Raspberry and just stick there, but that they stay and want to spend time on RISC-OS. I see two hands up. I'll just go left, just nearest to back. Sorry, Mark. The gentleman with the beard.
Right. You mentioned about RAID.
Yep.
Okay, I understood what you said.
Right.
But it seems to me that you only mentioned a pair of drives, each of 1 terabyte each, but both containing the same data.
Correct.
So that means that that backup system, or whatever, is basically only able to take 1 terabyte of data.
Yeah.
So is it possible to add more than just...
I mean, there are different ways of tackling this. You could have larger disks in there. The reason for choosing 1 terabyte drives is primarily one of price. That not many people want to pay for a pair of 2 terabyte drives, bearing in mind that post-Brexit 2 terabyte drives are, well, best part of £100+ each, and you multiply that up and it's a fair chunk of change. So if I'm going to have them to show you at this, there's no reason I couldn't build you one with a pair of 2 terabyte drives, but if I'm bringing them to sell, for most RISC-OS folks, 1 terabyte is a fair amount of storage, and But I will say that there are also other arguments that say if you want more storage than that, you are better looking at something like network-attached storage, bearing in mind what I was talking about, the network performance. Because network storage devices also use RAID, but there it's very easy to go for 2, 3, 4, 5, even 6 disk RAID, and go for sort of many terabytes. I mean, you don't want to know how many terabytes I've got in the home unit at the moment. But that's. I would suggest that if your data is so big that you're sort of saying, well, 1 terabyte just of storage is not enough for all the data I have, then you probably would be better served by network storage, simply because although you could move the RAID solution between different computers by connecting things, network storage is available instantaneously to all the computers that you own. And generally speaking, if you need such huge amounts of data space, pooling it like that so that it's shared between all your computers tends to make more sense than just having a big, giant, ridiculously sized pool on a single computer. Well, at least to me it does anyway.
Right, and finally, the drives that you're talking about, are they the little tiny pocket things that drop into your pocket, like USB?
In the particular solutions that we're selling, we use specially dedicated RAID drives, which are not designed as pocket-sized drives. They are proper drives. Drives are often these days tend to be sold for different purposes. It's certainly to a degree marketing, but there is a warranty element to it, and also how they handle errors is subtly different. That with RAID, there are specific timeouts involved, and drives need to respond within certain time frames in case of errors, in order for the RAID controller to understand and handle things properly. And they subtly change these error timings on different types of drive. So if you want to do RAID properly, you use drives that are designed for use in RAID arrays. You don't use sort of power saver drives. So we only use what we regard to be the proper drives. There is a price premium, unfortunately, with those. I mean, they cost about £10–15 more than an ordinary drive. But to my mind, you do something. If you're going to do it, you do it properly. You don't muck around. I know that there are the odd RAID drive that are the smaller drives. I think you can buy those. But again, I think if you're going to sort of do that, there's a reason why people use full-size drives, and they are a little bit faster as well. So I tend to prefer to do the proper thing. At the back, Mark.
Yeah. Can I ask how you see RISC-OS development playing alongside the rule bounty scheme, particularly so you don't end up competing for the same sources of finance and talent?
That's a fair comment. That's a difficult one to answer in terms of politics, because I mean the rule bounty system has yielded some good results, but the pots that are available for things are not representative, or haven't reached the representative sizes of the amount of work involved. So I was looking at some of the sort of complex bounties only last week sometime. I think it was probably Tuesday, and you were talking about bounty pots of maybe £1,000, £2,000. In the nicest possible way, that's not enough to pay a programmer to do a major piece of programming work. So
to encourage a volunteer, but not a professional.
that's it. So I think where risk cost developments comes in is the fact that we are funded, thanks combination of Richard and I's resources and what we've had invested from elsewhere. We're in a position to actually pay programmers properly to do work. Obviously, that's not a sort of infinite open checkbook. I mean, it's a dangerous thing to say when we talk. But on the other hand, if we just do things willy-nilly, then that's how you blow through money very, very quickly. One thing throughout my business career, I've been very, very cautious about things, possibly too cautious, some would say, but it does mean I'm still here talking to you. So I expect to apply the same fiscal caution to risk cost developments as well. But on the other hand, knowing that you aren't limited to just spending £1,000 on a project does make things much more practical. But the other part of the question is competing for the same programming resources. That is a big problem because there is only a limited amount of programming expertise within the risk cost community. And one of the things we have been discussing is possibly looking to some of the skilled people of the past who are still floating around the edges, but perhaps who don't contribute anymore because they don't think that risk cost matters anymore. And maybe we can sort of renew their interest because of what a combination of seeing what's happening in terms of risk costs is really moving forwards massively compared to what was happening 10, 15, 20 years ago, coupled with actual investment in the platform, may unlock doors that were previously closed.
So do you see the bounties as a way for, say, more small-scale development for specific issues, whereas risk cost developments is a way to raise large amounts for bigger end projects?
You could look at it like that. I mean, as I say, you're asking political questions, and I don't want to make judgments on another company's products and schemes. Sorry, but it's very difficult. I mean, the bounty system exists for what it does, but I'm sure I'm not the only one who wishes those bounties would get filled faster, shall we say? So yeah. Anybody have any other questions at the back there?
Will the results of this be available only to Arcop's customers, or will they go into the RISCO's open source tree, or what?
We don't see this as a money-making exercise. By which I mean that this is for the benefit of everybody, not the benefit of Arcom customers. So yes, we would expect the results to go into the rules source tree. Just as, for point of reference, all of the ARMX6 work is in the rules source tree, which is more than can be said for some of the other platforms, unfortunately. We have fulfilled our requirement to return all of the work that we do and continue to return the work that we do back into the source tree, and that would be same policy on this. We don't see this as as I say, this is not, the only way in which this is a money-making exercise for Arcomp is by virtue of the fact that I still want to be in business in 20 years' time.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Now, I will flip that round and say the best way that can happen is if people support Arcomp products, be it software or be it hardware, because if I don't have to worry about getting my cheese toasties, then that's more time I can spend on other things. But on the flip side, I don't want that to be taken as holding anything back. That is not the intention of this product. The risk cost developments is not I mean, that is not to say that we might not have some chargeable products at some point, but the primary goal of this exercise is not for risk cost developments to be a money-making thing. It's a making risk cost better thing, and it's a way of pooling resources to make things better. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense in modern, every cent matters Britain, but that you don't stay within this community. there's got to be this sort of, if you like, circular rolling system where everybody's helping everybody else, because otherwise there is no risk loss in 20 years. And as I say, that's why we're doing this, is for the future of the system, not to get rich quick, if you know what I mean. Quite the opposite. Anybody else have any questions?
I've got a question about the money side of it.
Mm-hmm.
I can see putting in £1,000 or £2,000 and getting no money back's fine. But is there any encouragement for putting in, say, 10 or 20 or 30 or 40,000? But that's not fine. We're getting nothing back from that. So there's no mechanism for any of the money coming back ever.
I think you need to talk to Richard about that rather than me. I mean, we are at the moment we are not looking at it in those terms, and certainly we would not be asking people to invest with it. I think the important thing to take away is that the project as originally envisaged is now funded, or we wouldn't be talking about it. So, if in a way the question is invalid because we're not asking you to spend money that and not get anything like.
I'm just trying to clarify this all. The bounty scheme is quite plain. You put in £500 into the bounty and you get a better risk loss out.
Yeah. Well, obviously, anybody who invests will be given a lot more information than what I'm giving you now.
Okay.
So that's the first thing, and that's between you and Richard to sort out, I would suggest. And secondly, I mean, just as with the bounties, you'll be getting things out of it in terms of all the things that happen as a result of it. As I say, this is not a case of just lining Arcom's pockets or lining or only benefiting Arcom customers. Quite the opposite. This is about everybody and everybody benefiting from the work that gets done. But equally, the only way you tackle big things, is by pooling resources to make something less. Like, as I say, I'll go back to something like RISC Limited. I mean, okay, RISC Limited perhaps leaves a slightly bitter taste in some people's mouths because of how things ended. But in terms of what it achieved, in terms of extracting RISC from Acorn and then delivering RISC 4 and then providing a basis on which companies like Castle could then build with the Ionics and so on and so forth, I think the company was very successful in terms of there being a RISC OS scene now. That progression of events of extracting RISC from Acorn so that we could break from the Acorn past as Acorn imploded, separate the operating system out, work with hardware manufacturers, then ultimately there was the transition to Castle and then to RISC Open Limited. Those things have taken money in the past, and this is a project to allow things to happen in the future.
That's clear enough.
So, yes, I mean, there are ways in which things can be monetized ultimately. I don't know about. Ultimately, it may well come down to the fact that if we want to keep going and the project rolling, we're going to need year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, and let's say we have year 1 and 2 sorted. Ultimately, we need to sort year 3, 4, 5, etc. And these are questions that exactly how we do that as we go forwards. But let's start on these things sooner rather than later. Anything else? Okay. Right.